Hi, it's been a little bit of a while since my last Atlantis Go video. I've made a few changes since then. I decided to go back to the start of the project and conduct it as I would have done a foundation project, because it means I'd be recording more of the process and it's a bit more structured in that way, so I think it'd be better for me to kind of get back into the habit of doing projects that way. I did a bit more research on the kind of coat that I wanted, and I did a bit of research on the golden age of piracy, which was between 1650 and 1730. I just did a kind of background historical research, but it was mainly the clothing that I was interested in, because in a lot of the imagery for pirates is these kind of heavy knee-length coats with lots of like really big chunky collars and cuffs, lots of buttons, that kind of thing. So I went and I looked at men's frock coats, I think they're called, between those times. And I have a book called The Cut of Men's Clothes 1600 to 1900, which was really useful. They show the patterns for all the different kinds of clothing throughout that time period. So it has like illustrations from different paintings and pictures from that time period. It's got patterns with scale markings, so you can draft those yourself if you wanted. And it's got a lot of details about like construction methods and everything, so I thought it was quite useful for this particular project. It's the very first coat in the time period I'm looking at. Is from 1681. It's very quite streamlined. It doesn't flare out that much. I like that it has buttons all the way down the front. That's quite good. I'd kind of prefer the skirt to be a bit more flary, to do the stuff that I want to do and have room for all the embroidery things. I did have a quick look at this one from 1720. The skirt is a lot fuller than I think I can probably work with at the minute, but it's got kind of like really big cuffs, that kind of thing that I was thinking about. So then the main inspiration for the pattern that I drafted was this one from 1760. It includes the waistcoat pattern as well and the breeches, but it's got like enough of a pleat to give it a bit of a swing, but it's not so wide that it's going to cause problems or take ages to embroider or anything like that. I was a bit confused about the how the pleats worked. I took a trip to the Victorian Albert Museum yesterday, and they actually had some frock coats on display, so I could have a good look at those and see kind of not 100% up close, but I could actually see it in front of me and kind of figure out how it was worked out. Which is quite interesting. I also looked at a book that I have called Historic Costumes and How to Make Them. It's not as in detail as the other one. So yeah, so the patterns are a lot simpler. There's no kind of measurement markings or anything like that, but it gives you the basic shape of the pattern pieces. So that's kind of interesting. There was one that I couldn't quite figure out how it went together from that time period I was looking at. I can't figure out what that triangle piece is and how it goes in with the rest of it. I might try and make like a miniature mock-up just to satisfy my curiosity. It's not really relevant. I don't think I'll be using that particular pattern, but it's just kind of like an interesting side note, I guess. I also looked at a book called Costume in Detail, 1730 to 1930 by Nancy Bradfield, and this book is fantastic. I used it so much on my foundation course. It's got really, really detailed drawings of like all the inner construction, like the embroidery bits, little accessories. It's only women's clothing, unfortunately, but I figured I could maybe take some kind of design details from there to use on my coat. The only thing I found that was really similar was this riding jacket from 1720, but it has the same kind of like pleats at the sides as the other one, and I quite liked the kind of pointed waistline, but I think I'd rather have the coat patterns just in like one piece rather than like chopping it up and doing anything too complicated with that. It's something interesting to maybe think about for our next project, but yeah. It would also mean that I'd have to do a lot more pattern matching with the fabric that I've picked, and I really don't have time for that. So, and the last interesting little thing I found was from a book called Victorian and Edwardian Fashions from La Mode Illustrée, which is a book I got for Christmas, I think, at the Christmas on my birthday. It's got some really beautiful fashion plates and things in, but the one I was looking at was this one right here. I really like the kind of chain across the back opening. I know it's from, it's kind of like embroidery, not embroidery, like braiding, just across the back opening there. So I thought that was really interesting and a nice little touch, so I might, I'm probably going to use that on my coat, even though it's a different time period, if that makes sense. It's only meant to be like loosely based on kind of shape of the coat. I don't want it to be too accurate, especially since I'm going to be wearing it to a steampunk event and that's more Victorian, but that's semantics. So I also had a quick look at some of the research I did for my bioluminescence project for my foundation, because I did a little bit of research on like sea theme stuff. It's all kind of linked into the same project anyway. But one particular interesting thing was the costumes from the Pirates of the Caribbean. I think it's Dead Man's Chest specifically. It's really difficult to get good photos of. I might have to watch the film again. But the kind of costumes of the crew is very kind of barnacly and very textured, and I really like that. I think what I am trying to achieve is more kind of not abstract, but not as realistic. A little bit more kind of embroidery based rather than trying to look realistic. It's just kind of interesting to see the different textures and maybe try and figure out how they've done it. Some of them I think they must have done from plastic moulds or some kind of thing, because there's like the corally stuff is just it looks too stiff to be like textile based. Which is kind of an interesting thing. Yeah, so for the actual pattern drafting, I did base it off the coat pattern that I drafted in the previous video. I decided I wanted a different collar shape. The one that I'd had, it would have just gone straight, like curved downwards. I kind of wanted to have like an actual, either a stand-up collar or like a collar like this. I haven't quite decided on that yet. But the new pattern, or the new design, you can see, is that. So it'll have the embroidery stuff around the bottom. The cuffs and the collar will be embroidered as well. There, I'll show you what that's going to be in a second. There's going to be pleats down the side with this fabric on. So it's quite pretty. It's like kind of shiny. It's a chiffon. So it's quite light. It'll probably be quite good for the pleats, because Georgian coats are quite heavily stiffened to kind of make them stick out and give them the structure. So I'm thinking if I stiffen the coat panels, this should hang quite nicely underneath that. So when I move, it'll kind of, that's the theory anyway. We'll see how that actually goes. So yeah, and then at the back will be there won't be any of that in the back pleat, back opening thing. But it will have the kind of frogging braid over the opening, like that dress from the Fashion Illustrée mode thingy, if that makes sense. So that's the plan, the new plan. I was going to make it double-breasted, so like the green jacket I made, so I can open the flaps and then fasten it at the front, but I think that's going to be a bit too much with the embroidery I've got planned for it, so I'm just going to have it as like a decorative thing rather than actual closure. I do have some hooks and eyes that I could use if I did really want to close it, but I'm going to see. That'll probably be one of the last things I add on. So, the pattern. So, first pattern I did, it wasn't quite right. I didn't quite like it. I had to change where the pleats were in some places. and I added the front panel. I made it one piece instead of two. It means I'm going to lose a little bit of fitting, but if it's going to be worn open anyway, then it won't really matter. It just means it'll be easier for like pattern matching, and it's also closer to the Georgian pattern that I've been inspired from. The back panel is the same with the back piece folded over, and then no, it won't be folded over, but the back piece twice so it has room for the slit, and then it's got side panels in to kind of bring it in a little bit more, so it will be a little bit fitted but not a huge amount. That is the front panel. I also redrafted the skirt section. I didn't make it like, because I usually use like a circle skirt or a half circle pattern to do this kind of thing, but I just kind of took what I had originally from the first pattern and then just added on more of a flare. So hopefully that'll turn out okay. It shouldn't be too much of a problem because it's going to be hanging mostly open anyway, so that should be fine. The sleeves I had a bit of trouble with. I'm going to have to do a mock-up of the sleeves on the actual coat itself once it's been mostly sewn together. But the pattern on the book that the Cuts is the pattern that I'm using from that. It seems to be kind of like bent at the elbow a little bit, which is fairly common with a lot of the kind of coats and waistcoats from that time period. I couldn't quite figure out what was going on with the underarm section though, because there's a little like a little triangle they put in, I guess just to give you more movement. I don't know whether I'll need that or not, possibly not. But so yeah, that took me a little while to figure out. I will probably make that up in just like a kind of cheap polycotton or something, just to kind of test out the pattern, see how it fits, see what works and what doesn't, and if not I'll just change to a kind of more conventional coat sleeve. For the stiffening, I had a bit of trouble figuring out what exactly I wanted to do. I had some very firm iron-on interfacing that I used. So the pattern pieces got cut out. That went fairly smoothly. I had a bit of trouble with the back panel just because I was tired and I was getting the pattern matching wrong, but it should be fine now. So they were cut out, and then I prepared them for the dyeing to kind of give it a bit more texture around the hem of the coat. So I basically just kind of scrunched them up, but with the top half of the coat just hanging free. Wound it around with just like a cheap tacking thread, and then boiled them for, I think it was about half an hour, 20 minutes. 20 minutes. So they kind of took in some of the colour, but not a huge amount. And for the most part it came out okay. There are some parts on here where it's very dark, which is a little bit annoying, especially on the front panel, because with the front panels, one of them is fine, it has like a kind of fairly smooth gradient. The other one has quite a dark line, so that's, yeah, so this one, so it has kind of a dark line coming up that way. But then this one's fairly standard throughout. So it's a little bit annoying, but it's dyeing, so it's going to be unpredictable to a degree. And if needs be, I can just cover that with the other embroidery. But it makes quite a nice effect. It's like, so that's the darker bit. So it's quite interesting. So I need to sew that all together. The interfacing, I had a bit of trouble trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the stiffening. I didn't want it to be massively stiff, but it just needs to be enough to kind of hold its shape. So I had firm iron-on interfacing on the bottom section up to the waistline, and then from there it's just medium, because it doesn't need to be like too stiff up that way. I'm kind of conscious about how the pleats are going to do, because the only problem I can really see is if the two pieces are kind of held at, two pieces are kind of joined at the waist, then all of this is like flapping free almost. So if they're going to start like overlapping in weird ways, that's not going to be ideal. But I think that's a problem I'm going to have to figure out when I actually get there, so I'll just have to wing it a little bit. I had a bit of trouble actually ironing the brocade flat, so because you can kind of see it's still a little bit creased. Not there's the lines for it's folded, but just from the scrunching, and I think the heat has just kind of made it a little bit more, it just made it a bit too creased, which is fine. I can work with it, and it kind of adds to the effect, I suppose, but I guess it's just something to watch out for in the future. collar pieces, I've started with a backing of, it's a kind of stretch, it's not massively stretchy, it's like a sateen, cotton sateen, it's got a bit of give in it, which is, you know, decent, it's workable. I'm going to use that for the lining as well, but I'm using it as a base for, this is the cuff piece, so it'll be like that. So it's still quite a wide cuff. I've given it kind of like scalloped edges. They're going to be more of a point when I've actually sewn it to the backing, when I've properly finished the edges and everything. To be more in line with the, I think it's the first sketch I did where it's got quite jagged edges on the cuff. I'm in the process of embroidering those at the minute, so I don't know how that's going to turn out just yet because it's got the curve and I need to kind of gather it in the right way. But these are the front collar pieces for the bodice, so they'll be like a bit like that, and one bit like that, and then the opening. You can see probably. It's kind of dark in here, the light is not good. So that's the kind of general idea. It's got quite a ruched surface. I'm gonna put some beads in there as well. I don't want to put too many beads in like I originally planned because I've also got the buttons and there's a lot of buttons to kind of go with the like the button all the way down the opening thing. I had a few problems with the embroidery on the back because getting the thread tension right, otherwise it was kind of like pulling it together like that, and it's not ideal really. But I think I've got the hang of it now, so it's fine. It doesn't actually take too long to make up either, which I'm quite pleased about because I thought this was going to be one of the more time-consuming things, but it's been fairly okay so far. I've also got the pocket flaps to do. They're probably going to be sewn on separately with the opening actually in the jacket itself. I haven't quite figured that out yet. The collar, I'm either going to do like a standing collar like the coats that I saw at the V&A, or I'm going to do quite a big chunky collar like some of the military uniforms they had at the time, because I quite like the collar. So it'll still be quite high, but it'll be very, it'll still be the pointed. That makes sense. I'll do a proper sketch of it later. And yeah, I think that's all caught up. Oh no, actually no, hang on. So, with the fabric choices, I was a bit concerned that I picked something that's kind of too mint colour. I just kind of bought it without really properly thinking about it. It seems to be that my go-to colour is like teal colours, so I kind of maybe wanted to deviate from that a bit. Because I was messing with dyeing as well, I wanted to see if there were any lighter fabrics I could use. So the brocade I was using, I think I showed you with the dye. I decided to do 3 different embroidery samples of the type of embroidery I wanted to do to see what the effect was, and also just to see about different colour combinations and stuff as well. So the first, it's not quite finished yet, but that is the first sort of sample I did. It's got like yo-yos that I've embroidered on there in different ways. These 2 have to be done yet. It's also got a bit of lace, kind of like brownie lace, it's kind of tucked under there to be more like seaweed. It's also got this, which is the same kind of gathering effect as on the collar pieces, but less dense, and it's got a couple of like iridescent beads in there as well. So that's that. The other 2, which I found after I'd sewn on the first yo-yo, I thought this isn't really going to work, so I just kind of abandoned them. But that was the cream one. The idea being that I could dye the fabric different colours. I'd have a bit more flexibility with the intensity of the colour as well, but again it's not, I wasn't really feeling it. I did do a dye sample of it, I don't know where it is at the minute. So I did do a dye sample of that one, it hasn't been ironed flat yet, but the result is very green, and I could probably mess around with other colours, but I don't really have the luxury of time at the minute, so I'd rather kind of not stick to what I know, but stick to what I know is going to work. Especially because I bought the other fabrics in with the first teal colour in mind, so it kind of makes sense to stick with that. But then I also had this kind of blue and black option, which would actually look kind of cool for like a bioluminescent themed one, so kind of more like neon greens paired in with that. Maybe some glow-in-the-dark stuff, that'd be quite cool. So if this coat goes well, I might make another one, maybe more faithful to the actual the Georgian pattern I was working from in the first place. Especially now I kind of know a bit more about their construction. So that might be kind of cool, but for future projects, not for now. Yeah, I think that's it for now. I'll probably do another update at the end of next week, possibly. I've kind of got to get my skates on now. I don't have much longer before my interview, which is when I'm hoping to have this coat completed by. If not, I'll just have it done whenever, I suppose. So yeah, I'll see you guys. Bye.